June 23rd, 2023, 11:17 in the morning. Miami heat presses down on the outdoor food court behind First Miami Presbyterian Church at 609 Brickell Avenue. Victor Manuel Rocha sits at a metal table, 73 years old, former United States ambassador, white hair, pressed shirt. He thinks he's meeting a Cuban intelligence operative, someone sent from Havana to check on him, to make sure the old spy is still loyal. He doesn't see the cameras, doesn't know every word is being recorded. The man across from him asks a simple question. Are you still with us? Rocha's face changes. Anger floods through him. I am pissed off, he says. His voice rises. It's like questioning my manhood. It's like you want me to drop them and show you if I still have testicles. The rage is real, the wounded pride of a spy who has served for 4 decades, who has never been caught, who believes his legend is perfect. The man across from him nods, takes notes, says nothing about the FBI badge in his pocket. 6 months later, Rocha will be in handcuffs. His 40-year career as Cuba's most successful infiltrator of the American government will be over. But in this moment, at this food court on a Friday morning in Miami's Brickell neighborhood, Victor Manuel Rocha still believes he is untouchable. The investigation into Victor Manuel Rocha had begun 13 months earlier when the FBI received a tip in 2022. Someone had information. Someone knew. The Bureau's counterintelligence division moved quickly but carefully. They had been hunting Cuban spies for decades. They knew how these operations worked. They understood the patience required. They knew that Cuban intelligence, the Dirección General de Inteligencia, trained their agents to wait, to blend in, to live their legends for entire lifetimes. What they didn't know yet was just how deep this particular betrayal went, how high it reached, or how long it had lasted. The tip led to surveillance. The surveillance led to a plan. By November 15, 2022, the FBI was ready to make contact. An undercover agent sent a WhatsApp message to Rocha's phone. The words were simple but carefully chosen. I have a message for you from your friends in Havana. The response came quickly. Rocha agreed to meet. The next day, November 16th, they met at the same location that would become their regular meeting spot, the food court behind First Miami Presbyterian Church. Rocha chose it. He told the undercover agent he picked that location because he didn't think he would be recognized there. He was wrong. The FBI was watching everything. Victor Manuel Rocha was born on October 23, 1950, in Bogota, Colombia. His father died when he was 10 years old. His mother moved the family to New York City, settling in the Morningside Heights housing projects in Harlem. She worked as a seamstress in a sweatshop factory. The family survived on her wages and food stamps. Young Manuel, as he was called, lived in the projects with his mother and uncle. It was a hard childhood, immigrant poverty in 1960s Harlem. But in 1965, everything changed. A scholarship arrived. The Taft School, an elite boarding academy in Connecticut, had accepted him. From the projects of Harlem to one of America's most prestigious prep schools. Rocha graduated from the Taft School in 1969, where he was captain of the soccer team. 3 years at Taft transformed him, gave him access, gave him connections, gave him the vocabulary and manners of America's elite. He graduated from Yale University cum laude in 1973. The Colombian immigrant kid from the Harlem projects now had an Ivy League degree. But 1973 was also the year everything changed in Chile. Salvador Allende, Chile's socialist president, was overthrown in a United States-backed coup on September 11th. Victor Manuel Rocha traveled to Chile that year. Federal prosecutors would later allege that this was when Cuba's intelligence service recruited him, when he became a great friend to the Dirección, when he agreed to spend his life serving the Cuban Revolution while pretending to serve the United States. Rocha received a master's degree in public administration from Harvard University in 1976 and a Master of Science in Foreign Service from Georgetown University in 1978. 2 more elite degrees, more credentials, more legitimacy, more access to the corridors of American power. He became a naturalized citizen of the United States in 1978. 5 years after allegedly agreeing to spy for Cuba, Victor Manuel Rocha swore an oath to the United States of America. He pledged to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. The oath was a lie. Federal prosecutors would later call every oath he ever took to the United States a lie. But in 1978, nobody suspected, nobody questioned, a young man from Columbia who had risen from poverty, a Yale graduate, a Harvard graduate, a Georgetown graduate, someone who spoke fluent Spanish and English, someone who understood Latin America. The State Department wanted people exactly like him. In November 1981, Rocha began working for the United States Department of State. His espionage career and his diplomatic career began almost simultaneously. For the next 41 years, he would serve two masters. Only one of them knew the truth. Rocha's legend was perfect. Cuban intelligence had instructed him to lead a normal life, to create a persona, to build credibility. According to the criminal complaint filed against him, Rocha told the undercover FBI agent that the direction had asked him to lead a normal life and that he had created the legend of a right-wing person. Legend is spycraft terminology. It means the fictional biography, a covert agent, constructs to conceal their true identity and allegiance. Rocha became that right-wing person, vocally anti-communist in public, a Cuba hardliner. In later years, he would become an over-the-top Donald Trump supporter. Friends and colleagues would remember him becoming increasingly political, increasingly conservative, increasingly vocal about his hatred for the Cuban regime. It was all theater, all misdirection, all legend. Nobody suspected that the loudest anti-Castro voice in the room might actually be serving Castro's intelligence service. The deception was meticulous. Rocha's career path gave him exactly the kind of access Cuban intelligence needed. From February 1987 to February 1989, he worked as a political military affairs officer in the United States Embassy in Tegucigalpa, Honduras. Honduras in the late 1980s was ground zero for American covert operations in Central America. The Contra War against Nicaragua's Sandinista government, CIA operations, military aid, secret funding, everything Cuba wanted to know about. Rocha served as first secretary of the United States Embassy in Mexico City, Mexico from February 1989 to November 1991. Mexico City was another intelligence gold mine, the largest American embassy in Latin America. Massive diplomatic and intelligence operations, surveillance of Cuba, monitoring of Soviet activities, all passing through channels Rocha had access to. Then came the Dominican Republic. From November 1991 to July 1994, Rocha served as Deputy Chief of the United States Embassy in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic. Deputy Chief of Mission is the second highest position in any American embassy. He had authority, he had clearances, he had access to classified cable traffic from Washington. Everything the ambassador saw, the Deputy Chief of Mission saw. Everything that came through the embassy, Rocha could access. For nearly 3 years, he operated at the highest levels of American diplomatic operations in the Caribbean. Cuban intelligence officers in Havana were receiving a steady stream of classified American diplomatic reporting. They were getting it from their agent inside the embassy, from the deputy chief who everyone trusted, from Victor Manuel Rocha. But nobody knew. The betrayal continued. In July 1994, Rocha's career took an even more significant turn. He was selected for a position that would give him direct influence over United States policy toward Cuba itself. From July 1994 to July 1995, Rocha worked as the Director of Inter-American Affairs on the United States National Security Council, the National Security Council, inside the White House, during the Clinton administration. His portfolio included Cuba policy. He was literally helping to shape American strategy toward the government he was secretly serving. Think about what that meant. Every policy, discussion about Cuba, every intelligence assessment, every diplomatic initiative, every covert program. Rocha was in the room. He was reading the classified briefings. He was participating in the meetings. He was helping to draft the policies, and he was reporting everything back to Havana. For 1 year, from July 1994 to July 1995, Cuban intelligence had a direct pipeline into White House decision-making about Cuba. The damage was incalculable. American intelligence operations against Cuba were probably compromised. Diplomatic initiatives were probably known to Havana before they were publicly announced. Covert programs were probably exposed. Lives may have been endangered. All because one man had been living a lie for more than a decade and nobody had caught him. After his year at the National Security Council, Rocha's next posting was the most sensitive and most ironic position imaginable. He was going to Havana. Between 1995 and July 1997, Rocha operated as the Deputy Principal Officer of the United States Interests Section of the Embassy of Switzerland in Havana, Cuba. Because the United States and Cuba had no formal diplomatic relations at that time, America didn't have an embassy in Havana. Instead, the Swiss embassy housed the United States Interests Section. It functioned as the de facto American embassy, and Victor Manuel Rocha was the #2 diplomat there. He was living in Havana, working in Havana, meeting with American intelligence officers in Havana, coordinating surveillance operations against Cuban intelligence in Havana, all while secretly serving Cuban intelligence. The audacity was breathtaking. Rocha's time in Havana from 1995 to 1997 coincided with one of the most tense periods in United States-Cuba relations. On February 24, 1996, Cuban military forces shot down 2 civilian aircraft operated by Brothers to the Rescue, a Miami-based organization that flew search missions for Cuban refugees in the Florida Straits. 4 men died. The shoot-down created an international crisis. American outrage was intense. Congress passed the Helms-Burton Act, tightening the embargo. Tensions soared. Years later, when Rocha met with the undercover FBI agent, he discussed this incident. He called it the knockdown of the small planes. He said Brothers to the Rescue and other similar people were pushing politics toward unnecessary provocations. He was justifying the murders of 4 men, defending Cuba's actions, revealing his true loyalties. From July 1997 until November 1999, Rocha served as Deputy Chief of the United States Embassy in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Another major embassy, another Deputy Chief of Mission position, another 2+ years of access to classified diplomatic and intelligence reporting. And then came the pinnacle, the ultimate achievement for a Cuban intelligence operation, getting their agent appointed as a United States ambassador. President Bill Clinton appointed Rocha as United States Ambassador to Bolivia on June 14, 2000. He was sworn in on July 14, 2000. He presented his credentials to the President of Bolivia on August 4, 2000, and served as ambassador until August 7, 2002. For 2 years, from 2000 to 2002, Victor Manuel Rocha was the personal representative of the President of the United States in Bolivia. He commanded the American embassy. He directed intelligence operations. He met with Bolivian government officials. He had access to every classified document in the embassy. He received briefings from the CIA station chief. He communicated directly with Washington on secure channels. He shaped American policy in Bolivia. And he reported everything to Cuban intelligence. Attorney General Merrick Garland would later call this one of the highest-reaching and longest-lasting infiltrations of the United States government by a foreign agent. Rocha's time as ambassador included one incident that would later seem even more suspicious. In 2002, weeks before Bolivia's presidential election, Rocha gave a public warning. He told the Bolivian people that if they elected Evo Morales, a leftist former coca farmer and protege of Fidel Castro, the United States might cut aid to Bolivia. The intervention was extraordinary. American ambassadors don't typically tell foreign countries who to vote for. The statement was widely seen as American interference. It backfired spectacularly. Morales's poll numbers jumped. The publicity helped legitimize him. 3 years later, Evo Morales was elected president. He thanked Rocha for being his best campaign chief. The New York Times reported the quote, "Morales was being sarcastic. He was mocking the American ambassador whose clumsy intervention had helped rather than hurt his campaign. But maybe it wasn't clumsy at all. Maybe Victor Manuel Rocha, the Cuban spy serving as American ambassador, had deliberately sabotaged United States interests in Bolivia. Maybe he had intentionally given a statement he knew would help the pro-Castro candidate. Maybe the goal all along was to assist Morales. We'll probably never know for certain. Rocha left his ambassadorship in 2002. He retired from the State Department after more than 20 years of service. He received a government pension. He received retirement benefits. He had served with distinction. Nobody suspected anything. Nobody investigated. Nobody questioned. For the next 20 years, Victor Manuel Rocha lived in Miami. He had a wife, Carla Whitkop Rocha. They had 2 children. He worked private sector jobs. He was a special advisor to the United States military commander of SOUTHCOM, the joint command responsible for Latin America and the Caribbean, which meant he still had access, still had security clearances, still had information valuable to Cuba. He served on advisory boards. He worked for law firms. He worked for corporations. In September 2023, just months before his arrest, LLYC, a communications and marketing firm, hired Rocha as a senior international business advisor. When the criminal charges were announced, they terminated his employment immediately. Rocha seemed to live comfortably in Miami. No extravagant displays of wealth that might draw attention. No sudden windfalls. The legend held. He made political donations. In his legend as a right-wing conservative, he donated $750 to Republican Congresswoman Maria Elvira Salazar. When Rocha was arrested, she returned the donation. Friends and former colleagues described him as increasingly political in his later years, an over-the-top Trump supporter, a MAGA enthusiast, vocally anti-communist. John Feely, a former United States ambassador to Panama who had once considered Rocha a mentor, said that when he last saw Rocha in 2019, Rocha had gone down a Trump MAGA rabbit hole. Feely said it was really uncomfortable. He and other colleagues never suspected it was part of Rocha's cover. They thought he had just become radicalized by conservative media. They never imagined the truth, that the loudest anti-Castro voice was actually serving Castro's intelligence directorate. The deception was complete. 40 years, undetected, unquestioned, unsuspected. But someone knew. Someone always knows. And in 2022, that someone told the FBI. The FBI received the tip in 2022. The criminal complaint doesn't identify who provided the information. It doesn't explain how the source knew. It doesn't reveal whether the tip came from a Cuban defector, an intelligence intercept, or another source entirely. All we know is that sometime in 2022, the FBI learned that Victor Manuel Rocha might be a Cuban agent. The Bureau moved carefully. Counterintelligence cases require patience, evidence, proof. You can't arrest someone based on a tip. You need them to incriminate themselves. The FBI developed a plan. They would approach Rocha directly. They would use an undercover agent posing as a Cuban intelligence operative. They would see if Rocha took the bait. On November 15, 2022, the undercover FBI agent sent a WhatsApp message to Rocha's phone. "I have a message for you from your friends in Havana." The message was calculated. It used language that a real Cuban intelligence officer might use to contact an agent. Friends in Havana was code. Anyone who had worked with Cuban intelligence would recognize it. Rocha responded. He agreed to meet. The next day, November 16, 2022, they met for the first time. The location was significant. First Miami Presbyterian Church at 609 Brickell Avenue in Miami's Brickell neighborhood, specifically the outdoor food court behind the church. Rocha chose the location. He told the undercover agent he picked it because he didn't think he would be recognized there. The church operated a community space called Brickell Soul, an outdoor area with food trucks, a place where business people grabbed lunch, a public space where a 72-year-old man meeting another man for coffee wouldn't attract attention. Rocha thought he was being careful. He didn't know the FBI was recording everything. The undercover agent arrived first, set up the surveillance equipment, waited. Then came a detail that revealed just how well-trained Rocha was. The criminal complaint describes how Rocha took a circuitous route to the meeting. He didn't drive straight there. He drove in circles. He took unexpected turns. He doubled back. He was conducting counter-surveillance, making sure he wasn't being followed, exactly as Cuban intelligence had trained him to do decades earlier. Prosecutors would later cite this as proof of his training, proof that he had been operating as a professional intelligence officer for decades. When Rocha arrived, he didn't immediately go to the meeting location. He stopped at a nearby spot. He watched. He scouted the area. He looked for anything unusual, any indication of surveillance, any sign of danger. Only when he was satisfied did he park his car and walk up. More spycraft, more evidence of professional training, more proof that this wasn't some amateur who had sent a few emails to Havana. This was a career intelligence officer. The undercover agent, using the alias Miguel, greeted Rocha in Spanish. All their conversations would be conducted in Spanish. The undercover agent introduced himself as a covert representative from Havana. His mission, he explained, was to contact Rocha, introduce himself as Rocha's new contact, and establish a new communication plan. Rocha answered with one word, "Yes?" And then he started talking. What happened next would seal Victor Manuel Rocha's fate. Over the course of that first meeting and 2 subsequent meetings, Rocha incriminated himself repeatedly, enthusiastically, and completely. He behaved exactly as a Cuban intelligence agent would behave. He used the vocabulary of Cuban intelligence. He followed the protocols of Cuban intelligence. He celebrated his work for Cuban intelligence. The undercover agent had given him every opportunity to deny everything, to say there had been a mistake, to claim he didn't know what the man was talking about. Instead, Rocha embraced it. He was proud. During that first meeting on November 16, 2022, Rocha gave the undercover agent a tutorial in operational security. Never use the words Cuba or Havana, he instructed. Always use euphemisms. Call it the island. Don't write anything down, he said, for security purposes. Rely on memory. These were the habits of a professional intelligence officer, habits ingrained over 40 years of secret work. Rocha told the undercover agent about his legend, how the direction, the Cuban intelligence service, had instructed him to lead a normal life, how he had created the persona of a right-wing person to maintain his cover. He spoke with pride about his work. What has been done has strengthened the revolution, he said. What we have done is enormous, more than a grand slam. A grand slam in espionage, the ultimate success, getting your agent to the level of ambassador, maintaining that agent undetected for 4 decades. Rocha was bragging. He was celebrating. He thought he was finally getting the recognition he deserved from Havana. Throughout the meetings, Rocha consistently referred to the United States as the enemy. Not America, not the United States, the enemy. That one word revealed everything, where his true loyalties lay, who he considered his real country, who he had really been serving for 40 years. He praised Fidel Castro, calling him the comandante with reverence, with respect, with affection. Castro had died in 2016, but to Rocha, he was still the comandante, still the leader of the revolution, still the man worth betraying his adopted country for. Rocha referred to his Cuban intelligence contacts as his compañeros, comrades. Not handlers, not contacts, not controllers. Comrades. The language of true belief, the vocabulary of someone who saw themselves as part of a shared ideological struggle. He described the Cuban intelligence services as the dirección, using the Spanish term, using the insider vocabulary, proving he was part of it. During one meeting, Rocha discussed Ana Montes, another American who spied for Cuba. Montes had worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency for years before being arrested in 2001. She served 20 years in prison before being released in 2023. Rocha's career had overlapped with hers. They had both been Cuban agents operating inside the United States government simultaneously. Rocha praised her, called her dedicated, said she would have done much more had she not been betrayed. The word betrayed. As if her arrest was a betrayal, as if discovering her espionage was somehow wrong. The mindset of a true believer. The second meeting occurred sometime in early 2023, again at the food court behind First Miami Presbyterian Church. Same location, same pattern. Rocha arrived using counter-surveillance methods, checked the area, made sure he wasn't being followed, sat down with the undercover agent he believed was Miguel from Cuban intelligence. This time, the undercover agent asked more probing questions. He asked Rocha about his access. What information had he provided over the years? What damage had he done to American interests? Rocha was cautious in his answers. Even proud as he was, he knew better than to give specifics that could be recorded. But he confirmed the scope of his work. He confirmed it had spanned decades. He confirmed it had been significant. The undercover agent asked about Rocha's current loyalty, whether after all these years, after his retirement, Rocha was still committed to Cuba. This was the question that would become famous. Are you still with us? It was a test, a verification. Cuban intelligence would naturally want to confirm that a retired agent now in his 70s, living comfortably in Miami, was still reliable. Rocha's response was volcanic. "I am angry," he said. "I am pissed off." His voice rose. "It's like questioning my manhood. It's like you want me to drop them and show you if I still have testicles." The rage was real. The wounded pride of a professional intelligence officer who had given 40 years of his life to Cuba's service and was now being questioned. The undercover agent backed off, apologized, said he had to ask. Protocol. Rocha calmed down, but the exchange had been recorded. His anger, his vehemence, his passionate defense of his loyalty to Cuba, all captured on FBI recording equipment. The third and final meeting took place on June 23, 2023, same location, the outdoor food court behind First Miami Presbyterian Church at 609 Brickell Avenue in Miami's Brickell neighborhood. It was a Friday morning, 11:17 a.m. Hot, humid. Miami in late June. Rocha arrived for what he thought would be another routine check-in with his Cuban handler, another meeting to confirm his continued loyalty, another session where he could feel important again. Relevant again. After years of retirement, after years of invisibility, these meetings must have made him feel valuable, must have given him purpose, must have reminded him that his 40 years of Secret Service had mattered. The undercover agent asked the same questions, confirmed the same details, gathered more evidence. Every word was recorded, every statement was documented, every admission was preserved for the criminal case that was already being built. Rocha didn't know that in 6 months he would be arrested, didn't know that FBI agents were already preparing the criminal complaint, didn't know that this meeting was the final piece of evidence they needed. After this third meeting, the FBI had everything. Multiple recorded admissions, video evidence of Rocha using counter-surveillance techniques, audio of him praising Castro, audio of him calling the United States the enemy, audio of him bragging about 40 years of espionage, audio of him referring to Cuban intelligence officers as his comrades. It was enough. On December 1, 2023, federal agents arrested Victor Manuel Rocha at his home in Miami, Florida. The arrest happened early morning. FBI agents surrounded Rocha's residence. Standard procedure for a counterintelligence arrest. They didn't know if he would try to flee, didn't know if he had weapons, didn't know if he might try to destroy evidence. They came prepared. When agents knocked on the door, Rocha answered. He was taken into custody. Without incident, no violence, no drama, no escape attempt. Just a 73-year-old man being led away in handcuffs. His wife, Carla Whitcop Rocha, was at home. When reporters called her later, she refused to comment. "I don't need to talk to you," she said, and hung up. She was photographed outside the Miami courthouse on Monday, December 4th, stone-faced, silent. The arrest remained secret over the weekend. The FBI wanted time to secure additional evidence, to search Rocha's home, to seize his computers and phones, to make sure nothing was destroyed. On Monday, December 4, 2023, the Department of Justice announced the arrest at a press conference in Washington. Attorney General Merrick Garland himself made the announcement. This action exposes one of the highest-reaching and longest-lasting infiltrations of the United States government by a foreign agent, Garland said. His tone was grave. This wasn't some low-level clerk who had passed a few documents. This was an ambassador, a National Security Council director, someone who had operated at the highest levels of American government for decades. For over 40 years, Victor Manuel Rocha served as an agent of the Cuban government and sought out and obtained positions within the United States government that would provide him with access to non-public information and the ability to affect United States foreign policy, Garland continued. Sought out and obtained, not accidentally ended up with, but deliberately pursued positions that would give him access, that would give him the ability to cause maximum damage. FBI Director Christopher Wray released a statement. Like all federal officials, United States diplomats swear an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. Acting as an agent for Cuba, a hostile foreign power, is a blatant violation of that oath and betrays the trust of the American people. The criminal complaint was unsealed. It contained devastating details: 3 meetings with an undercover agent, multiple recorded admissions, evidence of operational security techniques, references to Cuba as the island, praise for Fidel Castro, descriptions of United States as the enemy, boasts about 40 years of espionage. The document described how Rocha had traveled to meet his Cuban handlers as recently as 2017. He would fly from Miami to the Dominican Republic using his American passport. Then he would use his Dominican Republic passport, which he had obtained through marriage to a Dominican woman earlier in his life, to fly to Panama. From Panama, he would fly to Cuba, an elaborate travel pattern designed to hide his visits to Havana from American authorities. On other occasions, the complaint said Rocha flew directly to Cuba using his United States passport, bold, confident, certain he would never be caught. The complaint charged Rocha with multiple federal crimes, conspiring to act as an agent of a foreign government, without prior notification to the Attorney General, acting as an agent of a foreign government without prior notification to the Attorney General, using a passport obtained by false statement. The passport fraud charges stem from Rocha's applications for United States passports, where he had answered no to questions about whether he worked for a foreign government. Each application was a false statement. Each passport obtained through those false statements was a federal crime. Rocha made his first court appearance on Monday, December 4, 2023, federal court in Miami. He was brought in wearing civilian clothes. He said nothing. His attorney entered a not guilty plea on his behalf. The judge ordered him held without bond pending a detention hearing. Rocha broke down in tears during the brief appearance. The first crack in the facade, the first sign that the weight of 40 years of lies was collapsing on him. Prosecutors indicated that more charges were likely coming. The initial complaint was just the beginning. A grand jury would review the evidence and issue an indictment with additional counts. The reaction in Miami's Cuban exile community was immediate and fierce. Rage, betrayal, pain. For more than 1 million Cuban Americans living in South Florida, Rocha represented everything they despised. Someone who had taken advantage of American freedom and opportunity. Someone who had climbed to positions of power and influence. Someone who had then used that power to serve the regime they had fled. Demonstrations were planned. Former United States Ambassador Carlos Trujillo, who had served in the Trump administration, spoke to reporters. Any sentence that allows him to see the light of day again would not be justice, Trujillo said. He's a spy for a foreign adversary who put American lives at risk. Rocha's former colleagues in the State Department were stunned. James Durham Briggs, another former ambassador, told a reporter, "We all feel like we have received a swift kick to the gut." The sense of betrayal among career Foreign Service officers was profound. One of their own. Someone they had worked with. Someone they had trusted. Someone they had considered a colleague and friend. And he had been a Cuban spy the entire time. On December 5, 2023, a grand jury returned a superseding indictment. 15 charges total, 6 different crimes, conspiring to act as an illegal agent of a foreign government. Acting as an illegal agent of a foreign government. Conspiring to defraud the United States. 5 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of making false statements in passport applications, 4 counts of using a passport obtained by false statement, 1 count of making false statements and representations. If convicted on all counts, Rocha faced a maximum of 60 years in federal prison. He was 73 years old. Even a fraction of that sentence would be a life sentence. The federal criminal complaint didn't cite specific classified documents that Rocha had passed to Cuba, didn't describe particular intelligence operations he had compromised, didn't name American assets he had exposed. That information remained classified. The damage assessment was ongoing. The State Department and intelligence community were conducting a comprehensive review. What had Rocha accessed during his 20 years in government service? What classified briefings had he seen? What covert programs had he learned about? What diplomatic cables had he read? What intelligence reports had crossed his desk? The assessment would take years, might never be complete. Some damage might never be fully understood. On February 14, 2024, Rocha appeared in court again, this time for arraignment on the full indictment. Standing before United States District Judge Beth Bloom, he pleaded not guilty to all 15 charges. His attorney, Jacqueline Arango, filed motions for bond, argued that Rocha was not a flight risk, that he had lived in Miami for years, that he had family there, that he would surrender his passports. Judge Bloom denied the motion. Rocha remained in custody. But something had changed. Behind the scenes, prosecutors and Rocha's defense team were negotiating. A plea deal was being discussed. The evidence against Rocha was overwhelming. The recorded meetings, his own words, his own admissions, his own bragging about 40 years of espionage. There was no viable defense. Going to trial would be suicidal. On February 29, 2024, Rocha's attorneys filed a notice. Their client wished to change his plea. On April 12, 2024, Victor Manuel Rocha returned to federal court in Miami. The Wilkie D. Ferguson Jr. United States Courthouse on North Miami Avenue. Judge Beth Bloom presided. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, Cuban Americans from the community, former State Department officials, people who wanted to see justice, wanted to hear Rocha admit the truth, wanted to see him face consequences. Rocha, now 73 years old, stood before the judge dressed in a beige jail uniform. His white hair was neat. His expression was neutral. His attorney stood beside him. Judge Bloom asked the required questions. Do you understand the charges against you? Do you understand the rights you are giving up by pleading guilty? Do you understand the maximum penalties you face? Rocha answered each question quietly. Yes, yes, yes. Judge Bloom asked if he wished to change his plea. I am in agreement, Rocha said. The formal plea agreement had been negotiated over several weeks. Rocha would plead guilty to counts 1 and 2 of the indictment, conspiring to act as an agent of a foreign government, conspiring to defraud the United States. In exchange, prosecutors would dismiss the other 13 charges. The 2 counts he pleaded guilty to carried a maximum combined sentence of 15 years. That would be the recommendation. Judge Bloom listened to the plea, read the agreement. Then she stopped the proceedings. She had concerns, major concerns. The plea deal, as written, didn't include restitution for victims. It didn't strip Rocha of his United States citizenship. It didn't require forfeiture of his property. After his indictment, prosecutors revealed, Rocha had transferred ownership of 4 luxury condominiums and his bank accounts to his wife, a transparent attempt to shield assets from forfeiture. Judge Bloom questioned prosecutors sharply. Why wasn't denaturalization part of this agreement? Why weren't you seeking forfeiture of his property? Why weren't you protecting the rights of potential victims? Prosecutors argued that the United States government was the only victim, that no other individuals had come forward with evidence of harm, that denaturalization would have to be pursued separately as a civil action, that 15 years in federal prison for a 73-year-old man was effectively a life sentence. Judge Bloom was not satisfied, but ultimately she accepted the plea agreement. It wasn't her role to rewrite negotiated deals between prosecutors and defendants. Rocha then faced the moment of accountability. Judge Bloom asked him directly, "Did you conspire to act as a foreign agent on behalf of the Cuban government?" Rocha's voice was barely audible. "Yes." "Did you conspire to defraud the United States?" "Yes." "Acknowledge that you used this position to provide information to foreign adversaries?" "Yes." Every admission was recorded. Every yes was another nail in his legacy, another confirmation of 40 years of betrayal. The prosecution then made their case for sentencing. Assistant United States Attorney Jennifer Kepler stood and addressed the court. She described the scope of Rocha's betrayal: 4 decades of service to Cuba, access to America's most sensitive diplomatic and intelligence information, positions of extraordinary trust and responsibility, ambassador to Bolivia, National Security Council Director, Deputy Chief of Mission in multiple embassies. For years he worked for Cuba against the United States, working to undermine our nation and betray the oath he took to serve it, Kepler said. Rocha caused great damage and harm to the United States and its people. She detailed how Rocha had deliberately sought positions that would provide maximum intelligence value to Cuba, how he had shaped American policy to benefit Cuban interests, how he had compromised American operations across Latin America. She asked for the maximum sentence of 15 years. Rocha's attorney, Jacqueline Arango, then stood to make her case. She argued for leniency. Her client was 73 years old, in poor health, had already spent 4 months in custody. 15 years would mean he would die in prison. She emphasized that Rocha had pleaded guilty, had accepted responsibility, had spared the government the expense and exposure of a trial. She asked Judge Bloom to consider a sentence below the maximum, perhaps 10 years, perhaps less. Give him some hope of seeing freedom again before he dies, Arango said. Judge Bloom listened, took notes, but her expression revealed nothing. When Arango finished, Judge Bloom turned to Rocha. Do you wish to address the court? Rocha stood. For a moment he was silent. Then he spoke. His voice was quiet, apologetic. I deeply regret my actions, he said. I have let down my family, my colleagues, my country. He apologized to the American people, said he understood the harm he had caused, said he accepted full responsibility for his choices. It was a standard allocution, the kind of apology defendants give before sentencing. Whether Rocha meant any of it was impossible to know. Judge Bloom then delivered her sentence. Her voice was firm. Her words were measured. Victor Manuel Rocha, you have pleaded guilty to acting as an illegal agent of the Cuban government for more than 40 years. You infiltrated the highest levels of the United States government. You betrayed the trust placed in you. You violated every oath you ever took. You caused damage that may never be fully measured. She paused. The maximum sentence for your crimes is 15 years in federal prison. That is the sentence I am imposing. 15 years. No parole. Federal sentences require inmates to serve at least 85% of their time. That meant Rocha would serve a minimum of 12 years and 9 months. He would be 86 years old when released, if he lived that long. Judge Bloom continued, you will receive credit for the 4 months you have already served in pretrial detention. You will be required to serve 3 years of supervised release after your prison term. You will be subject to all standard conditions of supervised release, including reporting to a probation officer, allowing warrantless searches of your property, and restrictions on international travel. Rocha showed no emotion, no tears this time, just silence, acceptance. The reality settling in. 15 years in federal prison, the same federal prison system where Ana Montes, the other famous Cuban spy, had just finished serving 20 years. Judge Bloom concluded the hearing. The defendant is remanded to the custody of the Bureau of Prisons. Court is adjourned. United States Marshals led Rocha away. His wife Carla was not in the courtroom. Neither were his children. He walked out alone. The reaction was swift. Attorney General Merrick Garland released a statement within hours. Today's sentence makes clear that anyone who infiltrates our government and works to benefit a foreign adversary will face severe consequences. This defendant systematically lied to the United States government for decades. He betrayed the Constitution he swore to defend. He betrayed his colleagues. He betrayed the American people. FBI Director Christopher Wray added, this case demonstrates the FBI's unwavering commitment to protecting our nation from foreign intelligence threats. We will find those who betray their country, no matter how long it takes, no matter how well they've hidden. The case had taken 40 years to uncover, but only 18 months to prosecute. From the initial tip in 2022 to sentencing in April 2024. Speed was essential in counterintelligence cases. Every day Rocha remained free was another day he could flee. Another day he could destroy evidence. Another day he could warn Cuban intelligence that he had been compromised. The FBI's undercover operation had been brilliant in its simplicity. Don't try to surveil a trained intelligence officer. Don't try to catch him in the act. Just approach him. Pretend to be Cuban intelligence. See if he admits everything. And he did. The Cuban government remained silent. They never acknowledged Rocha, never claimed him as their agent, never protested his arrest. Standard procedure. Intelligence services never admit their operations, never claim their captured agents. Rocha was on his own. Victor Manuel Rocha is currently serving his 15-year sentence in federal prison. The Bureau of Prisons website lists him as inmate number 61288-018. He is housed at the Federal Correctional Institution in Miami, Florida, the same city where he lived for decades, the same city where he met with the undercover FBI agent at the food court. What damage did Rocha actually cause? The full answer remains classified. The State Department's damage assessment is ongoing and may never be publicly released. But the scope is clear. 40 years of access to classified diplomatic and intelligence information, 2 years as United States Ambassador to Bolivia, with access to all embassy operations, CIA briefings, and classified cable traffic. 1 year on the National Security Council, where he helped shape American policy toward Cuba. Multiple years as Deputy Chief of Mission with access to classified diplomatic and intelligence communications. Service in Honduras during the Contra War. Service in Mexico City during major covert operations. Service in Argentina during a critical period. 2 years living in Havana as the number 2 American diplomat, while secretly serving Cuban intelligence. How many American intelligence operations did Rocha compromise? How many covert agents did he expose? How many diplomatic initiatives did Cuba know about in advance because of Rocha? How many policy decisions were influenced by a man serving Cuban interests? We may never know. The counterintelligence damage from a 40-year penetration at this level is incalculable. John Bolton, President Trump's former national security advisor, called Rocha's case a significant systemic failure. Someone like this operating for 40 years shows gaps in our counterintelligence vetting and monitoring processes. We need to learn from this and fix those gaps. Former CIA officers interviewed by journalists pointed out that Rocha had been subjected to background checks and polygraphs throughout his career. He had passed every security review. Either he was an extraordinarily skilled liar, or the systems designed to catch spies have serious flaws. Probably both. The food court detail became symbolic. A 73-year-old former ambassador meeting an undercover FBI agent behind a church, in public, surrounded by people eating lunch. Having casual coffee at metal tables in Miami heat. Bragging about 40 years of espionage, the audacity, the carelessness, the confidence that he would never be caught. That one location, First Miami Presbyterian Church at 609 Brickell Avenue, where Rocha chose to meet because he thought nobody would recognize him there, became the place where his entire 40-year career collapsed. Every meeting was recorded. Every word was documented. Every admission was captured. The small detail that exposed Rocha wasn't a receipt or a coin or a secret message. It was his own pride, his own need to be recognized, his own belief that after 40 years of perfect operational security, he could finally talk about his accomplishments. He thought Miguel was from Havana. He thought he was finally getting the acknowledgement he deserved. Instead, Miguel was from the FBI, and every word Rocha said became evidence. Rocha had spent a lifetime maintaining his legend. The right-wing conservative, the anti-Castro hardliner, the loyal American diplomat, the MAGA enthusiast. All theater, all deception, all lies. But in 3 meetings at a food court, facing someone he thought was a Cuban comrade, the legend dissolved. The real Victor Manuel Rocha emerged, the man who called the United States the enemy, who praised Fidel Castro as the comandante, who described 40 years of espionage as more than a grand slam, who got angry when his loyalty to Cuba was questioned. That was the real man. And that real man is now in federal prison. The case of Victor Manuel Rocha stands as one of the most significant espionage cases in modern American history, not because of any single dramatic betrayal, not because of one particular piece of intelligence that caused immediate crisis, but because of the duration, the access, the depth of the penetration. 40 years, 4 decades of systematic betrayal, from the streets of Harlem to Yale to Harvard to Georgetown, from entry-level Foreign Service officer to United States ambassador, from obscurity to the National Security Council, all while secretly serving Cuban intelligence. The damage assessment will continue for years. Historians will study this case for decades. Counterintelligence professionals will use it as a training example for generations. And somewhere in a federal prison in Miami, a 73-year-old man who once commanded an American embassy now lives in an 8 by 10-foot cell. If you found this story as disturbing as I did, please hit the like button. This kind of content takes weeks of research through FBI documents, court records, and declassified files to get the specific details right. Subscribe to the channel if you want more deep dives into real espionage cases with the precise facts that matter. Drop a comment below and tell me which Cold War spy story you want covered next. Should I do the case of Ana Montes, the other Cuban spy who worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency? Or dive into Aldrich Ames, the CIA officer who sold out dozens of agents to the Soviet Union? Let me know. And hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next upload. These true stories of betrayal need to be told. They need to be remembered. Because the threat didn't end with the Cold War. As Victor Manuel Rocha proved, it never ended at all. Thanks for watching.